Alright, hello. So, today what I'm going to be talking about is despair in 100 Years of Solitude and hope in the House of Spirits. Both novels follow really similar themes and very similar narratives. Isabel Allende, the author of the House of Spirits, has said that her novel was really influenced by 100 Years of Solitude, but they both handle hope in super different ways. Because following like the Latin American lit traditions, they both are pulling heavily on the history of the country that the author is from. Gabriel Garcia Marquez doesn't really see hope in Colombia, whereas Isabel Allende seems to see some sort of hope for Chile. And the way that they both express these things is super interesting. So I'm going to really quickly go over the different main narratives of both of them. This clicker does not work. So the first one, 100 Years of Solitude, was written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez in 1967. It follows the story of the Buendia family and the founding of Macondo. It begins with Jose Arcadio Buendia, who founds a town named Macondo with his wife Ursula. The town blossoms into a larger town. The Buendia family grows. Jose Arcadio, Aureliano, and Amaranta are added to the family. Jose Arcadio quickly leaves with the circus, and the original Jose Arcadio's Roma friend Melquiades. The original Jose Arcadio begins to lose his mind, eventually falling insane, and only speaking Latin, resulting in him being tied up to the big tree in the front yard. Aureliano becomes involved with national politics after a rigged election and becomes a major revolutionary figure. Is known as Colonel Aureliano for the rest of the book. Eventually, he grows tired of the constant war and signs a treaty with the government, choosing to sit and waste away, creating small golden fishes in his Macondo workshop. A banana corporation moves in after this and builds a separate village nearby over the river. A short-lived prosperity follows. The town does really well, and then this age of prosperity is very short-lived because it ends with the massacre of the striking workers, of which Jose Arcadio Segundo is the only survivor. He attempts to tell the villagers of Macondo what happened. They refuse to believe him, and he's unable to prove it ever happened. This is based on something sort of similar that happened in Colombia that Gabriel Garcia Marquez, that's what he based it on. Ursula remains constant throughout the novel, serving as sort of a symbolic representation of the state of the family, the house and the town. After her death, everything sort of spirals out of control. The town falls into ruin, the house is destroyed, and the novel concludes with Amaranta Ursula and her nephew, Aureliano, in an incestuous relationship. They have a child with a pig's tail, fulfilling the lifetime nightmare of Ursula. The child is promptly eaten by ants, which fulfills the secretive text that Melquiades spent his final days writing. This text explains in detail every single thing that the Buendia family went through. It's sort of a prophetic text. As soon as Aureliano finishes decoding it, he reads that the Buendias will be destroyed and is killed with the town of Macondo in a tornado. This is a super abbreviated telling of the story, and I've cut out most of the characters because if I tried to give like a complete retelling of it, I would be writing for 100 pages and I'd be talking for hours. The basic outline of the House of Spirits follows sort of a similar narrative. Clara, who is portrayed as sort of like an Ursula, grows up with a magical sister, Rosa the Beautiful, who's based on Remedios the Beauty, which is a character from 100 Years of Solitude. She's engaged, Rosa the Beautiful is engaged to Esteban Trueba. Rosa is poisoned, which throws Clara into a muteness. Esteban leaves after Rosa's death and becomes the patron of his family hacienda, a town called Las Tres Marias, which is based on Macondo. It's sort of strange because this the House of the Spirits sort of serves as a spiritual successor to 100 Years of Solitude, where it's what would have happened if the Buendias didn't all die. And Esteban sort of returns this town to its former glory, but at the price of raping and terrorizing a lot of the women in the hacienda. He befriends the old leader of the town, Pedro Segunda Garcia, who's sort of like a strange conglomeration of the first Jose Arcadio and a non-ancestral final Aureliano, because he's one of the last Garcias. Esteban returns and promises his mother to get married and becomes engaged to Clara. He builds a large house to celebrate their marriage, and his sister Ferrula comes to live with them. Esteban and Ferrula fight for Clara's attention, and Esteban loses, which throws him into a rage, kicking Ferrula out of the house. Clara gives birth to Blanca and the twins Jaime and Nicolas. Blanca befriends Pedro Tercero Garcia, the son of Pedro Segundo, and they fall in love. Pedro Tercero is a revolutionary, so he's banned from Tres Marias by Esteban, but he continues to visit Blanca in disguise. Pedro Tercero is sort of Colonel Aureliano in a way. After Esteban discovers their affair, he beats Blanca and knocks out Clara's front teeth after she tells him to stop, and she promptly vows to never speak to him again. Jaime becomes a doctor and heavily involved in politics while remaining distant from everyone in the family. Blanca discovers that she's pregnant and with Pedro Tercero's baby and marries a French count, only to discover that he's pretty terrible. She births a daughter named Alba. In Tres Marias, Esteban becomes a senator and Clara dies. Alba is the only Trueba to sort of really develop a relationship with Esteban. He seems to truly care for her. Alba spends time with Pedro Tercero as well, because Blanca and him are dating again. Alba begins to date a university student named Miguel. He's a revolutionary and brother of Nicolas's old girlfriend. Alba joins in his revolutionary ideals. A military regime attacks and takes over the government in a coup, kills the president, and imprisons many of the university students and all of the government, including Alba. And Jaime is killed with the president. She's held in prison. Alba is held in prison and repeatedly tortured and raped for information on where Miguel is hiding. Esteban goes to great lengths to rescue her, eventually succeeding. Alba is revealed as the narrator of the novel, transcribing and writing additions to Clara's notebooks. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Both of them take a different look at. Obviously, 100 Years of Solitude. There's really only despair in that book, because Gabriel Garcia Marquez only sees despair in Colombia. He doesn't really think that there's any. Well, I guess he didn't. There isn't really any hope for the country. So, 100 Years of Solitude is sort of supposed to represent the history of the nation, and because at the end of the novel you figure out that everything that the Buendias have been doing has sort of been already lined out and it's all determined. That sort of pushes you into further despair and just the realization that nothing you do really matters in the end, because the last Buendia is going to be eaten by ants and have a pigtail. The Buendias really are in a worse situation than the Crow, because the Crow at least can sort of affect their future to a degree. If they want to reform their ways and reform their concepts, they can. But the Buendias can't, because they're stuck. They can't do anything. Their path has been walked and written by Melquiades. There's no hope at all. But Allende, while borrowing a lot from Gabriel Garcia Marquez, she makes her own distinction in the end of the novel. And I think that there is a lot of hope to be seen in the end of The House of Spirits, because she expresses what she thinks in the end of the novel, which I'll read. Now I seek my hatred and cannot seem to find it. I feel its flame going out as I come to understand the existence of Colonel Garcia and the others like him. As I understand my grandfather and piece things together from Clara's notebooks, my mother's letters, the ledgers of Tres Marias, and the many other documents spread before me on the table. It would be very difficult for me to avenge all those who should be avenged, because my revenge would just be another part of the same inexorable right. I have to break that terrible chain. I want to think that my task is life and that my mission is not to prolong hatred but simply to fill these pages while I wait for Miguel, while I bury my grandfather whose body lies beside me in this room, while I wait for better times to come, while I carry this child in my womb, the daughter of so many rapes, or perhaps of Miguel, but above all my own daughter. So, Alba, this, I love the end of the book because it really does give you such a sense of, like, the Trueba, the way that the Truebas and Esteban had run the family is over now. Alba is taking control, and she's really engaging in a form of radical hope here. She's throwing away the hate of Esteban and the way that the people before her have treated other people in a very Buendia way. And she's reforming her thick concepts and deciding that she doesn't need to have any form of revenge. She's just going to live essentially what is the best life for her. She's continuing the legacy of her family by continuing Blanca's work in the same way that the Crow, that Plenty Coup wanted the Crow to continue the legacy of the Crow by engaging in some of the same practices, but in a different way. She's hoping, she's engaging in hope for the future, because the hope, she's putting hope in this new child, that this new child will be able to bring a new hope, and she's able to hope after her abuse and torture at the hands of the Chilean government, choosing to claim this child as her own, regardless of where it came from. And I think that is a form of radical hope. So yeah.